Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Comic Source. Have a couple returning creators who've been on the show before, but they're here to talk about a project which we haven't talked about before. In case you haven't heard, there is a new Gunslinger Spawn series coming from Todd McFarlane Productions in the Spawn universe. It's being written by friend of the show, Jimmy Palmiotti, being drawn by returning creator Patric Reynolds. Gentlemen, thanks so much for taking the time to join me today.
That's our pleasure.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it.
So, for those that aren't familiar with Gunslinger Spawn, Jimmy, why don't you give a little bit of a history of who the character is or how you see him, and go ahead and give us the elevator pitch for this series that you and Patric are doing.
I think my elevator pitch is pick up issue 1 because it's going to fill in a lot of what people don't. We treating this as if almost as if you never read Gunslinger before. So when you pick up issue 1. You kind of grabbing onto the story that that Todd originally had in his regular Gunslinger book. I think it was issue 13 and 14, where he kind of teased the origin of the story. And what we did with issue 1 of Gunslinger is we blew it up. We blew the story up. We gave it a before, middle, and an after part of the origin, and It's basically a gunslinger with, Spawn powers. I mean, it really is Spawn. It really is Gunslinger Spawn. I can't say it more basic than that. It's Todd's. God, what is his book up to these days, number wise? It's probably up there.
Yeah, coming close to 360. In fact, it was just announced the other day he's taken over writing duties again with issue 360.
Yes, I mean, he originally, I think the first time we saw the Gunslinger was in Spawn 174 and 175, and that was written by David Hine and Brian Haberlin, and that is like a snippet of the story. And when Todd approached us to do the series, he's like, "I need you to build. I need you to build this universe up big time." And basically, in our story, he's a gunslinger. Obviously, he's a man for hire. But something happens to him, and he gets these Spawn powers, and he has to. The series that Patric and I are doing together is sort of like his first days. His learning, he's wearing his tricycle wheels right now.
Yeah.
He's learning. He's like a regular. He was a regular human being, and then all of a sudden, it's sort of like when you're a certain age and you're told something that changes your world. This happens to the gunslinger physically, and he starts to see the world that's outside of what normal people see. And we're following. The book is like the roots of the character. I don't want to give away too much because it is like as you go, you're kind of traveling with him and seeing that the world isn't everything it appears to be. And we start to get a feel of the Spawn universe that Todd built up, and there's characters behind the scenes in the stories. But unlike Todd's book with the regular Gunslinger series, this one it's very grounded after the Civil War. It's a very grounded book. It's gritty. Its storytelling is a little less in your face than the regular Gunslinger book, and I would reckon it to be sort of like if it was a movie, I'd say it's more like Unforgiven than it is like Tombstone in a way.
Yeah,
it's a slow burn at times, and again, we're going to be with the Gunslinger where he's learning not only he's trying to figure out what happened to him, but he's also learning along the way of just little things here and there, and as Todd told us, he says, "I want you guys on this book for a long time, so you don't have to feel this need to kind of shove all the story in one spot and then throw it out there." And it's a slow burn kind of book. But Patric and I have been working on it for the past year. I mean, we're happy to see issue 1 come out because it feels like it's a year and a half old by now to us.
Right.
Yeah, Patric, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, real quick before I throw it over to Patric, getting back to what you were saying, Jimmy, about, he showed up everybody 174, 175, but he already had the powers and what have you. Then in the regular book that's coming out right now, as Jimmy said, this is this is him having had these powers for a long time. He's sort of veteran and jaded. So it's great that you guys are going to go back and show us how he got to the point he's at now. So in terms of the evolution and going back to the earliest parts of the character, that brings me over to you, Patric, which is he may not even quite look like what he looks like in the modern Gunslinger Spawn book, where he's here in the modern day, because we're going to see him sort of evolve visually as well as he gets these powers and kind of learns who he is. Can you talk a little bit about that and the design? He's not, I imagine, not going to look exactly like he looks in the modern book, right?
As far as I know, like, probably not. But how it was pitched to me basically is basically this is Spawn, but like on a horse, but he hasn't figured out who he is yet.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, because one of the first comic job I ever got was Abe Sapien, the Haunted Boy, and it was before Abe Sapien became Abe Sapien. So I'm kind of used to like characters figuring out who the hell they are, as kind of making it up as they go. And I remember the first Spawn issue coming out. I think I was like 14 years old, and I was going, ooh, this guy looks really cool, and he's an agent of hell. Oh my God. And I didn't, it was just one of those things where you just, it's like a dream that was so big, you didn't even think it was going to come true. And then lo and behold, like 30 years later, I get to draw this guy, and I didn't know much about him at all. I didn't know much. I didn't even know there was a Gunslinger Spawn until very recently. But I remember I loved Westerns, and I remember I loved, like, my dad and I used to watch The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, like when I was a kid. And I thought, like, ooh, like the Man with No Name, like, who is he? Well, he doesn't have a name. And like I love the mystery of that. Is you kind of it kept you watching. You're like, what are his motivations? What is he all about? And I kind of like that mystery. Like, I use a lot of shadow in the work that I do, and I think that lends itself to the mystery of things too. It kind of allows the readers to participate along with the creators as you're kind of making this story up. And so I bought like a Spawn action figure. He's right there, and I thought, oh, what is he all about? How does he move? There's this great scene in Unforgiven. Toward the end, where, spoiler alert, Clint Eastwood is shooting everybody in the bar, and he's being shot at, but he's whirling around in his long coat, and he's not getting hit by all these bullets at close range. They're like hitting his cloak, and there's something kind of mysterious and almost like ghostly about him. And I kind of like that, like where Spawn's like outfit or his appearance is something sort of ethereal, right? Like some characters describe him as like being from a circus or something, like, and they're like, "What are you, from the circus?" Like, that's the closest thing people can come up with to how he looks, is a circus. So there's this. I'm used to drawing kind of monsters, with Abe Sapien and Joe Gollum and that kind of thing. And so this is right down my alley. I thought, okay, he's sort of, based in real life. People can see who he is, but there's something about him, like Clint Eastwood's cloak, where he's just sort of shifting, and you don't quite, it's on the edge of reality. And that's where I kind of like to be, is sort of like make it believable enough people can buy into, but like, still leaves enough for like people to interpret things, or to sort of associate their or people to add their imagination to, or activate their imagination. So I just had the action figure. I had what Todd told me, and he just said, go for it. And I thought, luckily, I'm still employed, and that's great. So he seems to like what I've been doing. And he actually asked me, he reached out to me on Instagram with the DMs, and, before all this, he asked me if I wanted to draw Spawn. I'm like, yeah, I'd like to draw Spawn. And during our first meeting, he asked me, like, okay, what genre do you want to do? And I think I actually called him sir. I was like, anything you want, sir. I promise I will do anything you want. He's like, no. That's not specific. Tell me what genre you want to work in. And I thought, a Western. I want to draw a Western. He's like, good to know. We'll be in touch. And the next day, Thomas said, would you like to work on Gunslinger Spawn? And before I started screeching like an 8-year-old, I told him yes. And I think I might have swore at him too. I'm like, fuck yeah. But So yeah, it's literally a dream come true, and I get to draw one of my favorite genres and one of my favorite comic book characters of all time.
So when Todd reached out and said, "Hey, you want to do a Gunslinger Spawn series?" Did he mention that Jimmy was going to be writing it?
I'm trying to remember. I think I was too starstruck to remember everything. that he just wanted me to draw this. I think I think Thomas Healy, our editor, might have mentioned it to me actually before he did. And I knew Jimmy's work through Jonah Hex, you know, and I knew that, like, okay, this guy. So when Thomas said Jimmy Palmiotti is going to be writing this, I'm like, oh, they're not screwing around, are they? They're coming off the top rope with this stuff. Okay, so they got a guy who knows how to do westerns. I better bring my game, my A game to it. So I'm sometimes I'm better off not knowing like who the writer is. I tend to nerd out on people, pretty easily, but yeah, I was thrilled that I got to draw Spawn, but I was even more thrilled that I, have a writer who knows his way around a Western really well. So, and it's apparent in every script. Like every time I read through a script, I can feel like the dust in my teeth, or when I'm drawing a flash flood, I can feel like the water, hitting me too. It's just, Jimmy's very good at putting you in a very specific time and place, and I think that's one of the strengths of this story is that it's an honest to God Western. It's an 1860, and you feel it with every page.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jimmy, I think you've written more issues of Jonah Hex than any other writer ever.
Well, Justin and I think we wrote, I don't know, 125 maybe or something like that. I've also written other Westerns, and I've also done stuff. But, this one's different because for me, it's really different because Todd and, to Patric, what Patric was saying before, the gunslinger he's drawing is a little more simple. Mm-hmm. It's the code, it's the hat. The modern one has all these spikes. It has all this crazy stuff on him. He looks like a heavy metal Spawn, gunslinger. Ours is pretty much, and why he gets that pushback. Like, are you at a circus? Because in the Old West, the guy walking around with a mask on is like right away. It's like, what is up with this guy? Yeah. And the hat is kind of, that's Todd's signature hat. It's very large, and I have to wrangle with the hat sometimes because I'm like, it's kind of ridiculous. And I'm writing it. And I'm like, he is appearance wise, he's kind of creepy and kind of, circus-like in a weird way, and especially the long coat and the whole thing. But it's funny because Todd actually called me on Sunday because he reread, I guess, issue 1 again with the lettering on it and everything, and he told me, he says, it's so beautiful, and he goes, it's such a nuanced story. He says, I kind of took some of the sound effects out because. He said, Patric's art is doing all the heavy lifting with it. I don't need the sound effects there. And I said, dude, it's your comic book. I said, you don't want it in there. I said, I kind of looked at your books and it was adding some big sound effects because that's what is in his regular books. And he's like, no, Patric did it's so nuanced in places. And it's kind of like, he said, it's kind of like you really have to sit down and dig it and read it. It's not a quick thing that you flip through and you go, I got it all. He said, there's a lot of back and forth and little nuance in the story. And he goes, even the stuff. And he says, I felt like it was something different. And he gave all the compliments in the world to both of us, Patric. And he was, look, he called me on a Sunday. That's number one. That's very cool. Yeah. Number two, he was on the phone with me for a good half hour talking about the issue. And, it was a really feel good moment. And we talked about the hat because I said, sometimes that hat is, and he says, he's reminding me, he's like, there's nuances with the hat in the modern books. And I said, no, I know that. I said, I have a part of the story where he has to deal with the hat. And I said, and he goes, well, and he gave me an idea to use that I'm going to use in a next issue that I'm writing. I think that's 9 or 10, I think. And it's just so funny when it's somebody else's, it's Todd's character, and he says, you got to make it yours. And I said, I know, but you set up all the skeleton of everything around it. So I have to kind of follow what was there before. But I said, but every other character in there is going to be walking in from Patric and I, coming in and saying, okay, these are the characters now that are kind of stuck around him, because Todd likes the idea of a supporting cast that keeps coming back. I'm slowly learning these things, Patric. So it's like, as I talk to Todd, I'm like, oh, okay, that's a great, and he's giving me ideas, and that's a great boss. Like I call him a great boss because he's so involved. Yeah.
Well, I'm learning a lot from you, Jimmy, too. Like, my thing is, like I'm used to drawing the slow burn kind of comics, right? Or the comics that are kind of street level and grounded, like Bloodstained Teeth, even though it's about vampires, is very, very grounded. And, the Mask that I did being before that was still pretty grounded, even though we have, a guy who's head made out of green Play-Doh. He was still on a real person. And so sometimes Jimmy will be like, hey, have you thought about like adding more drama this way? Or have you thought about like, maybe tweaking the angle? And even Todd himself was like, you don't, because I am so terrified that people are not going to read my story clearly, or that I'm not going to leave enough room for dialogue, that like I tend to like overcorrect and be way too safe about storytelling sometimes. And Todd was like, you don't have to worry about that stuff. I don't have to see the guy's hair. I just have to be able to see like a close up of his eyes or something, And so he's like, don't be afraid to push the drama. We'll figure out the lettering. We'll figure out the storytelling. But this is Spawn. People are going to read Spawn because he's going to blow someone's head off, not because he's thinking next to a campfire necessarily, or eating beans and stuff like that. No, he's going to be fighting demons. So adjusting. So I've actually, Jimmy's given some really good pointers about like, hey, you can add this group of soldiers in the background that'll actually add to the drama or whatever to the scene. And I've even gone back and just redone things myself, going like, you know what, there is a better angle I could have shot this at. And so I've gone back and actually fixed things just after looking at it, But yeah, it's gotten me out of my comfort zone, which is a good thing. I've always tried to learn to be a little more bombastic, or try to, work my angle so there's a little more action and drama and stuff like that, because that's ultimately why I started reading comics, is because Spawn was doing badass things, so, but yeah, I love learning. It's sort of like, not only do I love drawing this comic, but I also love learning about it and learning how to be a better artist. So,
yeah, I mean, that's great. I know you're constantly challenging yourself to get better, and that's really awesome. Were you going to add something, Jimmy?
No, I was just going to say it's looking better every issue, and I'm reluctant to give you that kind of artistic note. I don't do it very often to you because I'm crazy. I'll sit there all day. If you were in the room with me, it would be chaos for you, because I'd be like, I'd be over your shoulder going, yeah, that's good. But wouldn't it be better if we just loaded like 10 degrees and pushed it that way? But what you're doing, I like the idea of your art is quiet because the character is quiet at times. Yeah. And then when especially in issue 1, there's parts it's like screaming madness, and then it's quiet, like it's in a snowy air. You can feel the snow coming down. You can feel that echo, that non-echoing. And then when the action comes, it's like it's just like 4 pages of madness. And I always tell them, you to feel free to add more blood and guts, because Todd loves that stuff. When somebody's head gets blown off, Patric does a really good job of his anatomy goes to work there. And the first issue is a really fun and slow, weird burn. It's also a nod back to Todd's couple of issues where he introduced. Because Todd had in the original, that 2-part story in Gunslinger 13 and 14, he had like a tease of the origin. And what we did is we built the story before it and we built it afterwards. And then we created a character that sort of manipulates everything to get our main character, to get Gunslinger to become the Gunslinger. And so as the issues go on, it's a lot of revealing. It's a slow reveal. Anybody thinks it's going to be an origin and told in 2 pages is it reading the wrong book. This is a slow, crazy burn. But I will say the angle we're trying to do it is you're along for the ride with Gunslinger. You're seeing the things he's seeing, and he's processing it with you. We don't pull the book out too much away from him and set up stuff. I've only done that once or twice, because I feel like this is a book where we have to really look at the stuff with his point of view. So it's just an interesting book. Like I said, I am really excited for people to get it, because I'm sure, Patrick, you feel the same way. I just want to read those reviews of one and say, all right, did they get it, or they think we're insane? You know.
Well, speaking of origins, we heard how Patrick got on the project, and I'm really curious about how you got on the project. Who approached you, Jimmy, and what your reaction was, because you've kind of gotten away from doing, licensed stuff. You're doing your own stories with paper films and crowdfunding, and they're all awesome. So when I heard that you were doing this, first of all, I was like, like Patrick was saying, like, they're not kidding around. I was like, yes, Gunslinger Spawn, if it's going to be his origin, I want Jimmy writing, and I can't think of anybody who would do a better job. So I was so excited when I heard that you were doing it. But also, like, oh, you do have a boss now, like you were saying. Todd's your boss. You haven't been in that situation in a while. So tell us how it came about.
Well, after doing 125 or 100, whatever it was, 100 and something hexes and Jonah hexes, and then doing Harley Quinn for 5 years straight. I mean, Amanda and I did 2 to 3 books a month for 5 years. Think about it. It's like an insane amount of comics. I needed a break from other people's characters to do my own thing, which I've always done on the side. But also the stuff they were offering me was not, it was sort of like not right for me, and I had this thing. Thank God, we both make enough money. We don't have kids, so we can live cheap. But I said to myself at some point, I think I hit a certain age, and I said, I'm only going to take on the things that either I find fun or I find as a challenge. Because if I take on the stuff that's just a paying gig, and I've done that before for DC. I worked on Countdown, and I tried to quit that 3 times while I was working on it. They wouldn't let me quit it. I kept trying to quit it. I said, this story sucks. I want to get out. So I didn't want to be in that situation anymore. And I also wanted to be with somebody that understood that probably the best way to get work out of me is let me just do my job. Don't try to. I got offered one of the big main titles at one of the big 2, and they said I could do whatever I want. And I handed in my first outline, and they had 30 changes. And I said, and I walked away, and I said, I'm not your guy. Get somebody. I said, obviously, you're the editor. You want to write that, not me. So I was at New York Comic Con, and Thomas Healy came over to the table and introduced himself. And, like I thought it was just a fan. He came over, hey, how you doing? I'm Thomas. He goes, I work for Todd. And I'm like, oh, I said, I saw Todd in the deli before or something, whatever. And he says, yeah, he goes, let me ask you a question. Do you ever think you'd want to write a Western title for us, like a Gunslinger Spawn series? And I said, to work for Todd? And he goes, yeah. And I said, yeah, man, I've known him for forever, and I've never worked with him. And absolutely, give me a call. And I gave him my phone number and information. And as Patrick knows this, how many people do this at a con? They take your name and number, you never hear from them again.
Yep, all of them.
And then I heard, and then I just heard from like a week or 2 later, and he says, so what do you think? We actually talked about a couple of different books, but this one, like I said, let me read what I can. And they sent me all these files. And then I realized it was very complicated, like beyond complicated. And I said, okay, I want to pitch this. Can I write a Bible for the character just so I can have it as reference? And I did. And it's like, I don't know, it's like 20 pages of madness, but it helps me try to figure out what's going on, because it's the history of the Spawns. It's a lot of history in there. And I don't think there's one great cohesive place to read it in from A to Z. It's kind of tough. So I did a lot of reading, and I bought a lot of Spawn comics. I know they kept sending me files, but I need to have comics in my hand. I don't know, some crazy part of me. And I bought all these trade books, and then I pitched them, and then they came up with. They said, we're talking to this guy, Patrick. What do you think of his work? And I said, yeah, they showed me 2 or 3 samples from another book. And I was like, yeah, he's the guy. If you can get him, if it's possible, and because a lot of times they show you stuff and then come back and they go, oh, yeah, he's not available. He just took on, some other thing. But I got lucky with Patrick, and that was it. I mean, it was really quick. Todd got on a Zoom call with me, and we negotiated, and he told me what he expects, and he said to me, he goes, can you do a book and stay on a book for a while? And I said, yeah, man. I said, if anything, yes, I can. I said, I've had a couple of runs on books that go for years.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh yeah, that's right, man. He goes, yeah, all right, perfect. And he goes, just keep writing it. That's what he said. Just keep writing it. Keep knocking out an issue a month. Keep writing it. I want you guys to be on this for a while. And he goes, so don't spill all the beans right away. That's what he told me. Don't spill the beans.
Yeah, that sounds like
a very Todd thing to say.
Yeah.
But he's, Todd's amazing because like I've never worked with somebody that was so hands-on, so available if I needed him. And boy, every time I talk to him, I have to run and get a pencil and write down like 15 ideas he has. Like he's just like, I really make it my business to talk to him once in a while because he gives me like 44 more ideas, and I'm just like, yes,
Yeah, and he doesn't even realize he's doing it.
No, because he has his whole universe in his head, and when he's talking, I'm like writing stuff down because I'm like, who is that he's talking about? And then I have to call Thomas. I'm like, what the hell is that? And he's like, oh, that was in issue 287. You got to check it out. It's awesome. And I'm like, all right, send it to me. There's a lot there. And this book is a lot more complicated than any other Western I've ever written. Because Jonah Hex is pretty much easy.
Yeah.
That was an easy one. That was his origin is very simple. This one's very complicated because we have a character in the past coexisting with a book in present day. And so I have to be aware of what's going on in present day. And if he says something, if Todd just writes some reference in the background, I got to write it down because I'm like, okay, that happened at some point back then. So I have to make sure I either address it or I walk around it a little bit, because there's going to be a guy out there that's going to sit at the con and stand at me in front of me and go, you screwed up, man. And I just fear that day all the time. I can BS my way around anything. Don't get me wrong. And growing up in Brooklyn helped me with that. But you do get people like that, and I like to say I've done my research, and man, I've researched the hell out of it. But every time I talk to Todd, it's like another dimension, another door opens up, and I'm like, oh, okay, all right, that's it's his baby.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, that's his baby.
Oh yeah. Well, it sounds like you guys are having a ton of fun. So everybody, be sure to join in on the fun. The first issue comes out on December 18th. And remember, there is the regular modern-day Gunslinger Spawn series. So this one is DeadlyTales of Gunslinger Spawn. So when you go in and let your comic shop know that you're going to be pre-ordering this and, you want it every month when it comes out, make sure you specifically DeadlyTales of the Gunslinger Spawn. So,
the tales are deadly.
Yeah, exactly.
They're deadly tales.
Yeah, super deadly. So, like I said, Jimmy, it sounds like you guys are having a lot of fun. Let's close out with this. Anything that has surprised you, like you said, you guys are already working on future issues, or up to writing issue 9 or 10, so you've got a good chunk of issues kind of in the can already. Anything that has surprised you about the project?
Patrick, you want to go first on this one, because I got to think about that.
I think for me, I think Gunslinger Spawn is probably the most mainstream superhero thing that I've done so far before this year. Mm-hmm. And but I'm surprised at how much I relate to the gunslinger myself.
Oh, really?
I'm just trying to sort of figure out with every project I do, I sort of learn something about myself a little bit, and with Gunslinger Spawn, I'm sort of learning oh, I could do this now, or I don't have to keep doing it this way. And so I kind of to sort of make the character more, make the character to be more involved in the book. I kind of sort of emotionally attach myself to the character, because on some of these action shots, that's me in a trench coat posing,
Nice.
Just because the folds right or something like that, but at the same time, though, I kind of have to put myself literally inside the shoes of the gunslinger. And because the gunslinger is sort of unsure of himself and he doesn't quite know his own strength, his own powers, I think that's a great jumping off point for me. Because whenever I start a new comic, especially this one, I always feel like I'm in kind of deep water. I can't quite touch the bottom.
Yeah.
And like, as I keep learning, as I keep going with the project, I get more and more comfortable being in that ocean and all the creatures underneath it, so to speak. And so I get a little more comfortable with it. But I'm surprised that, like, you know, just how good of a character, or how compelling of a character he is, even though, like, I didn't know Spawn that well. When I read the first issue, I'm like, oh, okay, well, I can relate to that, or I can relate to that too. And it became like really easy for me to be attached to this character, and really a lot of really affirming for my own journey artistically, is to be involved with Gunslinger. But also there's a lot of there's like you know, most Spawn comics are if you're open to like any superhero comics, you know it's about the action and that kind of thing. But this one is like, you know, there's a lot of subtlety and nuance with the character and the interactions too. And I really like the fact that we have time to explore that, you know, with some of the characters that were in that like 3 or 4 page origin that was put out first, or kind of like fleshed out a little bit more. You know, this character has this kind of backstory, and this character has this kind of backstory. So, but yeah, I just like the fact that it's kind of like my favorite Western, but in a comic book, and with like a hell spawn, you know, with covered in chains. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, I mean, again, it sounds like the perfect project for you. It's got everything you love about Westerns, the richness of the world, character work. I do have to ask, you mentioned using yourself as a reference. Did you go out and buy some replica 6-shooters to pose with?
No, weirdly, even though Portland, Oregon, which is where I live, has a lot of costume stores, they don't really have that kind of stuff. So I have like a whole closet full of guns that I use, but like, so sometimes I have to do like some 3D modeling. Like Jimmy is very, very good about doing research. And the gun that, speaking of research, there he is. Jimmy, do you want to be in Gunslinger Spawn? I got a good part for you.
I'll not shave for 2 weeks. I'll fit right in.
I haven't shaved in 46 years, so don't feel bad.
There you
go. But sometimes what I'll do is like I'll do a lot of 3D modeling, and you know, Jimmy, like the gun that the Gunslinger Spawn uses is a Colt 1851 model, but like the typical Colt is like this weird kind of break action where it didn't use cartridges.
Yep.
You have to use it was like a ball and a rod, and so but they do make conversions for it. This is the level of research that I nerd out about. I'm sorry, but they do make conversions for it where it could actually accept cartridges. But I had to do all that kind of research on my own, because Gunslinger's got to load his gun quickly, and he can't just like, you know, be jamming balls in like the cylinder. So like, I have a trench coat that's about 3 sizes too big, so I can, like, you know, film little movies of myself, like doing these. It's the saddest short movies you've ever seen in your life. Just me like twirling in front of my camera. I've scared our dog, and I don't know why my girlfriend is still with me, but she just understands this is what I go through. But I usually use real people like myself, because I love lighting, and I love the way lighting activates like the narrative, and so that's kind of why I do those kind of things. I just can't make that up on my own. So
yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, it's fun.
Listen to that dedication to the craft, Jimmy. Doesn't that just
I see it. I see it in the art. I see it. The fun part for me is to come up with crazy things to get Patrick to write. Like, can we have like 30 prostitutes pushing a wall down? You know, and like, and it's funny because I see it clearly when I'm writing it. I see it so clearly. I'm like, because I'm trying to like, all right, what would make me stop in the middle of a movie and go, what am I watching right now? You know, this is insane. And then Patrick draws it, and it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. There it goes. Yeah, they're pushing the wall in. Oh look, they're all flying out the window. Like I sometimes the surprise I found in this book is I laugh out loud sometimes when I'm writing something, because it's so crazy. And you know, and I'm always like, you know, I tell them, yeah, that looks great. They can lose a little clothes now and again on the thing, because I'm trying to think of the people buying the book. I'm like, okay, people, but it's really fun. because I just I like the challenge. I like the challenge of something. I think I think I've seen so many westerns and read so many. I'm always trying to think of what's the thing I want to see a little more, or what's gonna bring out who this guy is. Like I want to put him in a place where he has to think his way out of this, and it's stuff is like happening around him that's so not grounded in reality, because it's, you know, the Spawn and dealing with the characters. I just love the quietness of his reactions sometimes in the book. Like he just sits there and he looks and he goes, okay. Like, you know, it's like this guy, the less dialogue that's in it, the more thought has gone into that scene, because I really do. And Patrick, you won't even believe me, but I do cut my dialogue back all the time. I write like a ton, and then I mean, there's a part in issue 1 where I have 2 guys rambling, and I know it's a gigantic word balloon, and that was the funny part of it for me. But the rest of the next 8 pages have no word balloons on it. Nobody's saying anything, and I like the nuances of that, and I love that Todd and Thomas and those guys are like totally on board for whatever madness we're throwing their way. So so the surprise is, I guess for me, is just like they're really letting us do what we want on it, and that's not something I get very often when working for other people.
Yeah, that's got to be kind of gratifying in a way, because it shows, you know, Todd and Thomas, they've built a fantastic universe, and anybody who's reading any of the Spawn books realizes that. But it's showing that they have confidence in you guys as in your talent as creators, and your track record and what have you.
But we're sweating it. We're still Patrick, right? We're still like sweating everything.
Yeah, you are. But they're showing trust. But yeah, that's just you guys wanting to do your absolute best.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh yeah. You know, like one of my favorite. This is kind of a hot take, but one of my favorite westerns is No Country for Old Men.
Yeah.
Even though it takes place in 1980. It could have very well taken place in 1880. Mm-hmm. You just change the costumes on the guys, but there's not, like, back to what Jimmy was talking about with no dialogue. There are stretches in that movie where there's no dialogue at all. But like the villain Anton Chigurh is almost like a wraith. He's a real guy, but there's something ghostly about him. He just shows up in the middle of the frame whenever he shows up, and he's just this pure menace. And, I try to approach, the comic this way. Like, if there were no dialogue, could you still tell the same story just with the pictures, right. And could you just show the action without, like, having to have some kind of witty one-liner or something like that? Can you just show everything like the way No Country for Old Men did? The shootouts are dialogue free, and they're messy too. They're all super messy. There's almost no like choreography, other than the fact that this is the most horrible thing that can happen to this person, in the most gruesome way possible. And I kind of like that lack of, I won't say sophistication, but like a lack of like choreography that way. You're watching something real. You're watching something that's actually could happen to somebody. So life is messy, especially when it comes to bullets flying through the air and violence and supernatural type of stuff. So again, reminder everybody, first issue is in comic shops on December 18th. DeadlyTales of the Gunslinger Spawn #1. And let your retailer know, hey, I don't just want #1. I'm on this book for a long time, because we know Jimmy and Patrick, as I said, are going to be on for a long time. It's a slow burn, compelling. So now's the time to pre-order. Let your shops know. It's the best way you can help out Jimmy and Patrick and the shop, so everybody knows that you want to get the book, because we know how crowded the shelves are, and if you want to make sure to guarantee yourself the copy, that's what you need to do. So as we're closing down here, gentlemen, do you want to let everybody know where they can find you online? You mentioned wanting to get that reaction when people read it. So are either of you active on social media? Where's the best place for people to reach out? We'll start with you, Jimmy.
Yeah, so on X, I'm on Blue Sky, and I'm on Instagram under my name. I try to kind of post to all three. Instagram's a little more work for me, but I kind of try to post a couple of times a day. Because I have a lot to say, and and plus when I'm posting, it's usually a break from writing. I'm usually taking a break, and I'm like, okay, let me just get my brain shut down for a little bit. But that's where you can find me, and paperfilms.com is my website.
Yep. And what about you, Patric?
So I deactivated my Twitter account for reasons, but I'm on Blue Sky, and which is so much better. Oh my God, I'm on Blue Sky, and I'm also on Instagram. And you can just search my name. It's Patric with no K. My father misspelled it on the birth certificate, so that's the funny story about that. And I'm also my website is www.murderinginc.com, and that's my social media presence so far. So
great.
Yeah.
Well, if anybody's having trouble finding these gentlemen, just go to the show notes. I'll put the social media and the websites there. So if you're having trouble finding them, you just go and click there. So I'm really excited. I can't wait to check it out. I'm even more excited because I don't quite, not that I'm bragging or anything, but I don't have to wait till the 18th because I'm going to get my press review copy so I can review it sooner than that. So I'd probably only have another maybe 2 weeks to wait instead of 3. But yeah, I'm super excited to check it out. You both know I'm big fans of your work. So best of luck with the title. Hope it sells gangbusters. And thanks a lot for joining me.
Thank you, buddy. Good seeing you.
And to everybody out there joining us, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on the audio only feed, we appreciate you joining us as always. And we'll talk to you next time.